How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, got a great question from one of our viewers. She's getting ready to do an interview on Thursday, so I want to get this content out today. There's three questions. I thought I myself can provide a perspective, but I also brought Connie Alleyne, who also has a perspective I think that would also be very, very helpful to this young lady who asked this question. But before we get to the question, if I may, can I introduce my expert, Connie Alleyne? Connie Alleyne, can you introduce yourself? And please, do not be humble.
Okay. Hi, my name is Connie Alleyne. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I come to you all with 10 years of experience from Rikers Island, another 5 years of prison administration experience from Connecticut Department of Corrections. I am also a criminal justice professor at Monroe College, and I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy, which brings me so much joy. I look forward to answering all the questions Anthony has for me today.
Well, I'm going to tell you something, Connie. That was a lot of selfish promotion there, so I'm going to have to Hey, wait, we did forget to mention one thing. I got a chance to listen to this great podcast called Fly Behind the Wall, which is a podcast that you produce. Great topic. Fear. Is it okay to be afraid? I've actually covered this before. I'm glad that you were able to revisit it because a lot of people don't understand how fear can be a motivator. And I think that you spelled it out great on your podcast. So guys, if you get a chance, please check this out. It's called The Fly Behind the Wall. It's a podcast by Connie Alleyne. And it's this topic, she has a few episodes up there, but this topic specifically was hit home for me. It's called, Is It Okay to Be Afraid? Now, guys, let me just read this letter I got. I'm not going to say the person's name, and then we're going to go to a sponsor, and then we're going to go ahead and answer it. Maybe you guys also in the community can help balance what we're going to, supply here. So, hello, Anthony. I'm new to the correctional officer world. I've applied to be a correctional officer. I made it through the test, first interview, background check, and reference check. I now just got a call that this week I meet with the deputy superintendent. My first question is, any tips for preparing for that? So we'll explore that first, Connie. I watched your video on the initial interview and it helped, but what about the interview with the higher command for final approval and psych evaluation? That's the first part. Now, my second question is, what examples and tips do you have for building rapport with inmates but not being their friend at the same time? Great question. I come from the background of customer service. What is the line between building rapport, showing respect, and being nice? Can you give examples of the right way to build rapport with the inmates without giving out your personal info or crossing over that authority line? And again, it's a great question. My final question is how you handle a situation of being a CO to someone you knew on the outside. Do you act like you know them? Do you just say, I'm keeping work separate? If I get the job, I'll be supervising an inmate who I knew for years since I was a kid. This inmate did something absolutely horrible that rocked our community. I never thought she was like that. If she brings up the topic of killing her son and molesting him, how should I react? Thank you. Guys, there's some very interesting topics to explore here. We'll go question by question. There's three, and I couldn't have anybody better than Connie on the show today because we're going to have different perspectives, but definitely a real good dialogue. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talk, see brave men and women that work in corrections. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. The bell's going to notify you every time I post a new video. We'll go to our sponsor, and when we come back, we're going to dive into our viewers' questions.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Guys, inmate manipulation is a course that is highly needed. It's the process that's so slow moving and subtle that you don't realize it's happening. When inmates choose to manipulate, they manipulate our need to react. Situational awareness and insight is going to save your career. It's going to save you from doing foolish things. Listen to your gut. So the more insight we have, the more we can recognize what isn't so overt, and we can correct our behavior before we fall into a trap that we can't get out of. allow an inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role, you are opening up a door for a host of problems.
Inmate manipulation, the psychology behind inmate manipulation. Available now. Link in description.
All right, guys, and we're back. Two things before we go in. If you guys have any questions, email me, gangianthony@yahoo.com, or I'm sure Connie will. She addresses a lot of the civilian stuff, but she does have a balanced approach. Maybe you want to ask her some questions. She could give her email out. Connie, what's your email?
Sure, it's constantinealleyne@gmail.com.
Right, and guys, we always have these avenues open, so feel free. This actually helps us create topics, so we're more than happy to help. And also, don't forget, we do have a Tier Talk podcast. If you guys get a chance, please check it out. Links in the description. New shows air every Friday. And I believe the one this Friday is actually going to be with Connie Alleyne, how custody can work with medical and just get a good understanding of what it's like to be a nurse in corrections. So, Connie, the first question that we have from the viewer was dealing with that interview process. Now, you have actual HR experience. So we're talking about, we're past the initial interview. Now we're at that higher level interview where you get that, that superintendent, if need be. I don't know how it is for other facilities, but you're getting people that are really high up. So what would you recommend during that interview process?
So I would recommend before you even get there that you actually do some research. Now, there is no expectation that you're going to know everything about corrections, but you need to have some foundation as to what you're walking into. When you're speaking with the higher ups, they want to know that you kind of can get the big picture and that you can see things from multiple perspectives. They're not going to expect you to have a comprehensive understanding because you haven't necessarily walked the walk. You may not know how certain things apply, but they definitely want to know that you've at least done something to kind of learn about the environment and understand what you're truly walking into.
Now, Connie, what do you feel when I say this? Or when we were discussing this before, I mentioned you could be confident even when you don't know something. What does that mean to you?
To me, that means you can't walk around sort of in a fog, right? Nobody wants you to walk around not being aware or not being confident about what you do know. And at the end of the day, I think the confidence comes in, do I know how to get the information? I may not know everything, but do I know who to ask? Do I know where to go? Do I have a contact person, contact number? Whatever it is, they want to be able to know that you have some critical thinking skills that are going to help you navigate the waters.
Now, when I interview, because I've interviewed people, right? What I like to do is I want to get the best of somebody. So I try my best to ease the atmosphere at the very beginning. I want people to know that the agency has a need and you're helping us fill that need. So technically, if I could give one piece of advice, know that you're coming in providing something to the agency. So don't come in desperation. They need you just as much as you may need a job. So have that kind of balance, that initial impact when you walk in and it's like, oh my God, there's no need to be desperate. They're hiring because they need somebody and you're a fit for the job. So you want them to know that they need you. Second thing is when you're truthful with what they ask, even if you don't know something, truth brings consistency. Consistency brings confidence. So again, if I don't know something, I'm going to at least understand how I can get the answer. So if they ask me a question that's so left field, I'm going to take a second to process that. And I'm saying, you know what? Never been asked that question before. But with that said, these are maybe the routes that I would take to try to solve that. Now, listen, the routes may not be 100%, specific to the job that you're going for right now in corrections, but maybe you could bring up a similar situation that showed your ability to adapt and adjust in the professions that you had prior as a customer service professional. So, you know what? Let's say it's a problematic employee question. You know what? I haven't dealt with that obviously specifically in corrections, but with that said, I have dealt with problematic customers, and this is how I was able to deal with that. I think the key here, what they want on these interviews, is your ability to adapt and adjust. So they do not want you to freeze. So if you can't come up with something particular to that question based on the new job, what you could do technically is relate to the jobs you've had in the past and try to build some experience there and give them something. And I'm going to tell you something. I think, Connie, you would agree with this. That would definitely bring you some level of confidence when answering the questions, because you should be familiar with the jobs you've already done. Would you agree?
Absolutely. So, there is this, understanding that you had a life before you stepped through those doors. And so when you step in, just understand that everyone was once new, right? When it's not a new emotion that you're going in, that you're going to be nervous, but it's also just knowing that you've got to be able to control that, because in the real situations that you get in, emotions will be high. And so part of that interview process is being able to understand how you're able to function under pressure, and like, how do you think quickly on your feet? So don't just think about it as they're asking me some questions, I need to come up with answers. I think you also have to be mindful that the assessment is more of a holistic assessment. We want to see, if you're thrown something from left field, how do you think on your feet? Are you able to come up with some answer that could be transferable in the environment, though you may have never worked there before? So I absolutely agree. There's so many layers, I think, of that interview process that you can't 100% be prepared, but you can walk in with the confidence that I'm going to do my best to answer the questions to the best of my ability. And I completely agree with Anthony when he says that at the end of the day, they also need you. You made it to this point and they do need you. So don't go in with that feeling of, oh my God, I'm going to mess up and then they're going to let me go. No, they do need you. But those are coaching opportunities as well. So, whoever's interviewing you will probably take note of those things. Don't try to hide it.
You know what I agree with, Connie? Those frames. Those are beautiful frames. I like them. They're really nice frames, but I like what we did. So basically, we're giving the person some confidence, obviously, the consistency. You don't know something, it's okay to say you don't know. Give yourself a chance to process the question as it comes in. And listen, if you don't understand the question, sometimes, remember, the people that are asking the questions may not even know the answers themselves. So it's true, it happens. So, you can say, hey, can you do me a favor? I'm sorry, can you rephrase the question? Or, can you maybe give me a little bit of an explanation? Because I've dealt it where I've asked a question, I don't even know what I'm asking. So, it's okay to ask. And also, when the interview is done, you're allowed to ask questions after the interview. That's kind of your chance. So if there's any questions that you have about the profession, you should ask those questions because they show interest. Maybe a good turnaround question that I would ask is, what do you expect from me? What is it that you would like me to bring to the table? I think that's great because it shows your interest. In every interview I've ever done, I've always went back to the person being interviewed and said, hey, listen, we're done with our question. What questions would you like to ask us? Do you think that's an important part? And if so, Connie, what questions would you ask the panel? Because we do that.
Yes. So I absolutely believe that asking questions shows that you're engaged and it shows that you have a particular interest. Even if it's just a matter of asking, how do you feel that my skills will fit into, this role? Because sometimes you may not see the benefits that you're bringing to the table, but they see it. So there could be some qualities or something in your resume that really stuck out, which they want to now find out. So if you say, so what was it about my resume that, made me interesting? Or what is it about me that you think makes me a good fit for this role? There's no reason why you can't ask those questions. That's really what you want to walk away knowing, that this partnership is good for both of you, not just for the department.
Right. And I love that, Connie. And the question does show an interest. It really shows that, it's not about the money. Like a lot of people, when you go back and you ask them, you have a chance to ask person like, oh, what's my schedule going to be like? Or, what kind of pay is this? I love when someone just turns around and says, what do you expect from me? It just shows that there's an interest outside of that incentive, because I'm going to tell you something, surviving this profession, that external incentive, it's not about that. It's about what you internally feel about what you're going to do. And again, consistency, adapt and adjust. I think that's pretty much really good general knowledge And I think we can move over to the next question, which I think is something that we love to explore. You know what? Before we go to the second question, I apologize. Let's go to the third question, because to me, the third question is a bit more simpler to answer when it comes to supervising someone that you may know inside the facility. Now, right off the bat, let's do this. When you get the job, you need to make the agency aware of this. Do not hide it. There's nothing to be embarrassed from. Please let them know, hey, I know this person knows me. I just want to inform you of that. Now, what the agency should do right now is protect you. What I mean by that is you should not be in a way where you're going to be supervising that individual. The agency should protect you. They may not be able to transfer the person out. It happens. But you should not be in a position to directly supervise the individual. One thing you also want to do is you also want to write on your report that even though you know that's individual, it will not affect how you do your job. You will still remain professional, whatever the case may be. But here's another thing. The reason why you also want to tell the agency is because the agency at one point is going to need to approach that inmate and tell the inmate, because you know the inmate already knows you. They need to put the inmate on check. Say, you know, if there's personal information and we find out you're leaking it, we find out you're going to be in trouble. You know, they need to put that inmate on check, because here's another thing too. Sometimes when inmates have personal information about staff, they're in a position of power. So other inmates will try to manipulate that power or try to get that inmate to manipulate you. So that person that you knew outside, because of external influences now inside the prison, is not the person you know. I don't care if it's your brother. I don't care if it's your sister. I don't care who it is, because they're facing different pressures that change who they are, different stresses. So, oh, that person's a good person. I know them from the streets. Nope. That person's facing pressure right now to get information about you. You don't know. So you cannot have that level of trust behind that wall, and you have to set that tone. Now, if there's a chance that you are going to have an interaction, it could happen. You could be walking past and there's an interaction. Let it be known right at that moment to that inmate. Hey, I'm not who you know out there. I'm officer such and such. Correct it anyway. Hey, if you, let's say, you know, I'm not going to say her first name, but let's say it's Connie. And the person goes, hey, don't call me Connie again. My name is Officer Alleyne. This is what I do, blah, blah, blah. Straight. Let them know you're zero tolerance. And also, here's another thing, too. Make the other inmates aware of that, too. You know, make the other inmates aware. If that person is trying to pull a little game and there's other inmates involved, you straighten that inmate out right in front of the other inmates. Shows that you're zero tolerance and you're not one to mess with. But Connie, have you had this in your experience? Have you had to work directly with people that you knew, and how did you handle that?
So absolutely. So, I mean, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. So, I mean, I see people from the neighborhood on Rikers Island all the time. And, you know, hey, Connie, what's up? No, it's not, hey, Connie, what's up? You know, like I would have to correct them in the moment. I would also let custody know. I mean, mostly my clinic officer who I worked closest with, hey, let me let you know such and such is there. They're like, all right, let's create a profile. Let's make sure that, you know, there isn't a situation where you have to work with that person. And quite honestly, sometimes you don't even know. You come across a name and you're like, oh, wow. I've had encounters where I've had to end, like I saw the person come to the door and I didn't even meet with them for that same reason. This is somebody I know. Let me let the officer know this is somebody I know. They don't need to be on my caseload. And I actually remove myself from the caseload because I don't want any perception of anything inappropriate. And so I think we do have to do our best to safeguard ourselves. I mean, I've had nurses come in who've treated inmates in the community in the hospital, and then it turns out they end up treating, you know, inmates in the facility. And so there's times where they've not provided treatment because they've already known or already treated them in the community. So it's about being able to set your own personal boundaries, going to custody, being transparent, because you don't want there to be any perception of any wrongdoing or anything inappropriate. And I 100% agree with you as far as setting the boundaries in front of other inmates, because you just never know that power dynamic that exists outside of that interaction there. And the perception that somehow that inmate has some sort of leverage with you is not one that you want to, you know, give off.
You know what's great is you're also talking about perception, which definitely going to play into the second question that we kind of skipped over for a second. But again, I just want to finish off this part. This is pretty much quick. You know, get that report in immediately. I don't know if it's something you're going to have to mention in the interview, but I mean, if you feel the need to, you can. I would just wait until you get hired and immediately tell them at that point, I know this individual, and write a report. You have to have it documented. Don't, tell somebody and not document it. Trust and believe. This is something you want to have documented just in case rumors start to spread or whatever it is. Hey guys, I reported it. I documented it. I did what was expected of me. So this is not a conversation that you're going to have on the side with somebody. You're going to go to the proper authority, whether it's administration or the investigative division or even your immediate supervisor, and what I would like to do is when you write your report, again, it doesn't affect you professionally. You'll still do your job, but administration should not put you in an area where you have to directly supervise that individual. If they do that, that's weakness on my end. I'm not a big fan of that. Now, I've dealt with inmates I know, so just a quick story. I was lucky because I work in a prison, so I was able to say what I had to say, and the inmate was quickly transferred out. But I still felt that I could still do my job. I actually have a cousin that's locked up for life, and I didn't even know it was my cousin. That's the funny thing. I didn't know the spelling of his name. He became Muslim, and his name changed. So I would deal with this inmate every day, but not know that, hey, wait a second. And one day I'm looking, I'm like, hold on, wait a second. Let me read this. The spelling was way off. And then when I looked it up, I found out that that's him. That's my mother's brother's son. So during these, I did the report immediately. And then this inmate here actually wind up staying because I wind up getting promoted and I was the first one to leave. But the moment I found out he was a relative, I did my report, did what I had to do, but I also went to him and I said, hey, listen, I said, did you know? And he said he knew. So he knew more than I knew, but he never asked for anything because, again, I'm universal in how I carry myself. So even if it was family, he's not getting nothing. But he just had respect for who I was, but he knew who I was. So there's going to be inmates also that are in there that may know you that you don't know you. Maybe someone from high school that you forgot about, whatever it is. So you got to be fair with everyone, fair, firm, and consistent. And, Russ said it best about this, so I really agree with this. For a while, when I was teaching fair, firm, and consistent, I was telling people that's how you treat the inmates. And Russ said, try it this way, Gangi. That's how you have to see yourself so you can treat the inmates in a fair, firm, and consistent manner. But again, report it. Try not to have any dealings with that inmate as best as possible. Talk to management. Hopefully they get the inmate off the unit. But if not, it's okay because you wrote a report that states that you can still do your job professionally. And if you have that interaction, you got to make it to that. You got to make it known to that inmate that this is who I am now. I don't give a shit what we were in the past. And I also want to mention another thing. This may cross into the second question, but remember this. I don't care what history you have with that individual in the past. I don't care if they saved your life. I'm sorry. You're not obligated to that inmate. So I don't know what type of history you have with that individual. Don't play that route. Set the standard right there. It's done. Move on. So good question. And I did have something from my supervisor who's great people, and she wanted me to pass this along for that. She goes, if the person knows the inmate, the best advice you could tell that person right off the bat is don't work the same unit as that individual. And that's where management comes in to protect that officer. So that's why you wrote that report. So I think that's true. Put it right back on management. Okay, so for the second question, I'm sorry, well, it's the third question, but it's the second question in the order that she asked, was about building a rapport with inmates that's professional but doesn't cross the line. So this is our expertise. This is what me and you do, Connie. So we could explore this all day, but she does have an interview this Thursday, so I want to try to give her just maybe some bullets here. But let's start. I'll have you open the dialogue with this first, Connie. How do we balance, professionalism and being courteous with not crossing that line?
All right, so I find that this can be particularly challenging sometimes for females just because we don't intentionally send off any signals. So this time, I smile all the time. You guys joke about how much I smile, right? And so I had to figure out, how do I still be myself and not be that person that's just smiling with all the inmates, because I may mean nothing about it because I genuinely smile all the time, but that can be misinterpreted. So I think from a professional standpoint, it's acknowledging that, you know what, I'm working in this correctional setting. And even though I might be a smiler, I'm a good morning, everyone, my reality is that I had to tone it down, and I had to be mindful of it. And I had to be very mindful of whether or not, like, how, if, so you could look at someone and the inmate could think something totally different that you're just looking, right? And so I think the professionalism is where I think the consistency comes in, that if you are consistently professional, so like it would be different if I only smiled at inmates, right? Because then somebody might ask a question. But genuinely, I consistently, hey, good morning, everybody, or I smile at everybody. But when it comes to getting down to working with the population, they understand, oh, she's not giving you that. Like, they kind of know, because you have to set those boundaries. And that's not having to be nasty. That's really just redirecting them sometimes in the right way. Oh, Miss Alleyne, can I get your pen? No, you can't use my pen. You know you can't use my pen. Like, where do you need to go to get a pen, right? Like, it's sort of that redirection. Hey, can I get some paper? No, I'm not giving you no paper. You know, and they always seem like really harmless questions, harmless acts. And so you have to, as a professional, be able to say, okay, I know that there's an appropriate place for this person to get this thing. I am not the place for it, you know? I mean, even when I think about the last question about, you know, the inmate giving all this personal information about her story and wanting to talk, even with that, you don't have to necessarily have a conversation with that person. What you can say is, I'll connect you with a social worker, right? Because then you're redirecting that person to let them know, I am not the right person. I'm going to still do my job, right? Because I'd hate for it to be, you're trying to confide something in me and then you hang up the next day, right? I would feel awful. So it's knowing that when the offenders come to you with different things, that you don't have to be a nasty person about it. There's a way to redirect those requests, keep it professional, and not send off any signals. Be very aware of your body language. Be very aware of how you look at people. And it sounds awful, but it's just a reality that you're going into a facility where, if it's a prison, many of the men have not seen a woman in a long time, right? Or not seen, here you are, a new woman coming into the system. So there's probably other females in the system, but they saw them already. And so the approach to you might be completely different, because here you are now coming into the system. So, I mean, I think we could talk a whole lot about this particular topic, simply because the way we conduct ourselves as females in corrections, working with male and female inmates, you know, it really does impact the way we carry ourselves.
Well, Connie, before I want to explore, because actually you're talking about perception, but before we get that, I want to say one more thing that you mentioned that was important about personal information. Protect your personal information. That, trust and believe, personal information is leverage if an inmate gets a hold of it. Personal information, I don't care how small you think it is. I don't care if it's about what your favorite sports team is. There's no reason for the dialogue to even carry into that direction. You know, don't go down these roads that you don't know where you're going, which could start from a little question that winds up taking you into this whole other, you know, I'll give you an example. Let's say I live in Jersey, right? Which I do. You know, and someone says, what's my favorite sports team? You know, I could say Giants and maybe I'm more up north. Or I could say Philadelphia Eagles and now they know I'm somewhere down central Jersey. You know, everything, you know, there's leverage for it. So the best advice at first, because we're going to explore this a little bit more. I'm not done yet with it, but I want to get this out before I forget. Protect that personal information, and you're in control of the communication. You're the one that asks these questions. Believe it or not, the person that asks these questions is the one that's in control. So if an inmate comes up to you and tries to say, you know, how many kids do you have? You know, I may come back and say, well, how many kids do you think I have? I want to know why you're asking, because sometimes when they ask the question, they have the answer already. So I may go, what kind of car do you drive? What kind of car do you think I drive? You know, I'm going to put it right back on the inmate. But then eventually I'm going to tell the inmate, don't get me wrong, because I want to find out why they're asking me that question. But once I get the information, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to tell you why none of this is your business. And I'm going to make it known. But I do want to know why you're asking me. That's why I may come off polite at first, like, you know, hey, where are you from? Where do you think I'm from? You know, I want information about me. I want to know what you know about me. But then I'm going to turn around and say, well, let me tell you right now, loud as hell, why this is none of your business and why you don't need to know this. And I'm going to tell you something. when you check that inmate for the first time, word will travel among the compound. But if you don't check that inmate, word will travel among the compound. And this talks about perception. Everything you mentioned right now is about perception, the body language, the smiles, the whatever it is. But inmates like the fact that they're very aware of how we're seen. Trust and believe that. We may not be aware of how we are seen, but they are. They'll slowly inch closer. So, instead of you guys being separated, let's say by a podium where they should be in front, they're on the side. And trust and believe they know it. And you may not be thinking nothing of it, but your peers see it. And what your peers say is, it's sad to say, instead of them correcting you, which they should do, they should take you aside and they should say, hey, listen, looks a little too close. But most of the time they don't. Sometimes they'd rather go and talk stuff instead of making a correction. But the sad thing is, it starts to put a little divide between you and your peers, because your peers will start thinking that you're too close. And guys, if you're watching this right now and you're a senior officer, correct that. Don't talk behind that person's back, because maybe they don't know what's going on. Maybe they're being caught up in a game, and we should be policing each other. Instead of going behind and talking behind that individual's back, go get that officer real quick and say, do me a favor. Next time you talk to the inmate, bring the inmate over here, because that perception right there just didn't look right. But I want to ask you if you could just dive into a little bit more of that perception. That is so important. Perception. Can you explore that a little bit for me?
So I think one of the things, so an example that I have, for example, is, so one day I'm sitting in my office. I was waiting for a couple of, inmates to come down, and they had written some requests talking about whatever. And so as I'm sitting there, I was on the phone, and the inmate kind of just walked into my office. And so initially I was a little taken back by the just walking into my office. And then he took a seat. And so I get off the phone and I tell him to get out. And so the niceness, there's this perception that I'm nice, right? Because she's always smiling. But there was a point where I had to set that boundary. I'll call you when I'm ready. I need you to step outside and go have a seat. And then the other inmates were like, oh shit, she kicked you out, right? But it was, you've got to establish the boundary, because then they take advantage of it. So this one walks in. I don't know if the officer saw him even walk into my office, right? But he walks in. And so the moment that you start looking, you think perception, you have other inmates who are observing what this guy just did, and now they think it's okay. And so you don't, want to become what they perceive you to be, because you haven't set the boundaries. And it's really important that you do. Even if you're walking down the walkway, somebody says, hey, Miss Alleyne, I need X, Y, or Z. Okay, no problem. I'll call you down. I'll get back to you. But you have somebody come down the walkway, but they're stepping into your personal space. That looks like there's a different type of relationship with you and that offender, and you have to correct that. I've had to many times even work, especially working in a female facility. Females talk to you, and I've had female inmates come talk to me like they're my friend. And it's like, nah, I'm not your friend, And as much as you want to be nice, you have to set that boundary, because other offenders are looking at this like, oh, she's cool. She's cool with the administrator. Look how they're talking to each other, And I think you cannot ignore the strength or the importance of perception, because then not only do you have the other offenders looking, but then you've got even custody. For me, I was in custody. So now I've got, this Captain Connie, what's up with that? And I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with them. But I'm glad that they ask, as opposed to assuming that there's something going on, because the captain was like, don't let him come in your face like that. Because I'm not thinking danger, right? I'm thinking the inmate's talking to me something about medical, which is private, but someone is so close in your personal space, you can't respond because they're so close to you. So if this inmate decided she was going to hit me or whatever was going to happen, I was so close in that person's space, I didn't have enough space to defend myself. So I think there's certain ways to really look at not only just the perception, but setting those personal boundaries so that you don't get hurt.
And definitely setting that personal boundary is not being afraid to say no. And you have to say no with authority. Guys, even when inmates question the no's, you don't really have to give them the answers, but if you decide to, please make sure that you justify it with something internal. Don't be pushing it on someone else for the no. The no is no. It comes from you. Be that broken record. It's a lot harder for inmates to manipulate the no that's followed by a no, followed by another no. What they do is they look for a weakness in how you justify the no. Also, we're all in this profession. We're not perfect. We know that for a fact. We're not perfect. So what we tend to do is we lean on others to help us, give us that balance. So I'm okay with having my peers strengthen my vulnerabilities, which means that, if I'm confused or if I don't know what's going on, I want the inmates to see me go to my peers. I want them to see me go to the officers, or if I'm a civilian, go to the officers, go to my peers. I just want them to see that we're connected and that no matter what happens, they can't separate me from my support staff. So again, I think we hit a lot of our questions, still a lot to explore. I have a group of inmate manipulation videos that will really balance it out. Connie has a lot of stuff that was actual good training for civilians, but also great training for us in custody, because we all deal with manipulation tactics from inmates, which are progressive and they evolve. So manipulation is really formed on the individual. So you may look at something and say, well, that will never happen to me because that game wasn't designed for you. There's a game for everyone. But great open dialogue, again, and also that firm, fair, consistent, be confident, and never be obligated to an inmate. Never, ever be obligated to an inmate. We mentioned that. Never do favors for, inmate will come up and say, can I do a favor for you? Negative. Gave you an assignment, it's an assignment. Get that word favor out of there. Favor means that you have to repay that. I mean, we can go all day on this, like you said, but I think we have enough to start the journey, to start that initial interaction with the population. Hey, Connie, anything you want to say in closing?
I would just say when it all comes down to it, make sure you know your policies, your procedures, your post orders, know that stuff, because the inmates know it. And when they come to you asking you for stuff that they know they shouldn't have, they know the policy probably better than you do. And so get very familiar with those policies. And if you think you're misinterpreting something, you're not quite sure, just go ask someone, because other people are more than willing to help. It doesn't matter if you're new or not. People genuinely don't want you to fail. And quite frankly, when we talked, I think a previous show we did about weak links, you understand that when you have someone who's afraid to kind of own their own vulnerabilities, they create this weakness in the links and allow for the offenders to get in and manipulate and really create a dangerous situation.
Right, and the cool thing is, me and Connie, we know your name, so if you ever have any concerns, we'll look for your emails. Because I'm very curious to see how your career goes. I'm curious to see the outcome of the interview for the person that sent me the email. And now you're in our mental database, which means we do get a lot of emails and we try to get them all. But for those that we're very particularly interested, especially ones that we do videos for, we do look for those individuals when they do send us emails, because we're interested to see what was the outcome of the advice we gave. We love it when we give advice and someone sends us an email saying, hey, Gan, I did this and I did that, or hey, Connie, I did this and I did that. So we always find an interest in the follow-up. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you have any concerns, feel free to email either me or Connie. And as always, guys, just stay safe. I said the show is Tier Talk. Sorry. Please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. The bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. And stay safe. Thank you, everyone.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk, the #1 spot for all things prisons and jails. Don't forget, you can find us on multiple venues, including YouTube, Corrections One, Law Enforcement Today, Facebook, Instagram. Tier Talk is a show dedicated to the brave men and women that work in corrections, the brave men and women who sacrifice their lives every day working in the shadows of justice. It's time for their voices to be heard.